The night sky over Arizona was clear, dotted with countless stars that seemed to shimmer like diamonds scattered across velvet. Daniel Harper adjusted his telescope, focusing on a cluster of bright lights that had appeared suddenly in Earth's orbit. He wasn't sure what he was looking at first. The objects were too large and moved in perfect formation, unlike any satellite or space debris he'd ever seen. His heart raced as he zoomed in further, trying to make sense of the strange shapes hanging silently above the planet. Daniel worked alone at the observatory, tucked away in the desert where the skies were dark and uninterrupted by city lights. It was quiet here, save for the hum of equipment and the occasional rustle of wind through the dry brush outside. But tonight, the silence felt heavier, almost oppressive. Something about those lights made him uneasy. He grabbed his phone and snapped a few photos, then sent them off to colleagues in other parts of the world. Maybe someone else could explain what they were seeing. Thousands of miles away, Laura Bennett sat in her cramped apartment in New York City, scrolling through social media. Reports of unusual activity in the sky were flooding timelines. People posting videos of glowing streaks moving across the heavens. At first, she dismissed it as hype, just another internet rumor blowing out of proportion. But when her editor called asking if she'd look into it, she couldn't say no. Space stories were her specialty, after all. Laura packed her bag and headed to Washington, D.C., hoping to get answers from experts. On the way, she noticed something odd. The air felt different, charged, like before a storm. She shrugged it off and focused on finding credible sources. Her first stop was NASA headquarters, but officials there refused to comment, citing ongoing investigations. Frustrated, she decided to visit an old acquaintance, Dr. Emily Dawson, a xenobiologist who often spoke about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. When Laura arrived at Emily's lab, the scientist was already poring over data on her computer screen. Without even greeting her guest, Emily pointed to a series of graphs showing unusual energy readings coming from the mysterious objects. "They're not natural," Emily said bluntly. "Whatever these things are, they're artificial. And they've been emitting low-frequency pulses since they showed up." Back in Arizona, Daniel confirmed Emily's findings. Using specialized instruments, he detected faint vibrations radiating outward from the objects. They reminded him of sonar waves, as though the ships were scanning the planet below. But why? What were they looking for? And more importantly, why hadn't they tried to communicate? As hours passed, panic began spreading worldwide. News outlets reported sightings of the fleet over major cities: Tokyo, London, Sydney, all confirming the same thing. This was no ordinary phenomenon. Governments scrambled to respond, but their efforts seemed futile. Attempts to send signals via radio waves went unanswered. Military forces stood ready, unsure whether to treat the situation as a threat or wait for clarification. In Egypt, Captain Matthew Cole watched nervously as one of the largest ships descended closer to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its surface gleamed under the sunlight, reflecting sharp angles that gave it an almost reptilian appearance. Soldiers under his command raised their weapons, waiting for orders. Matthew knew firing blindly would be suicide, but doing nothing felt equally wrong. He clenched his fists, torn between fear and duty. Meanwhile, Laura interviewed anyone willing to talk, piecing together fragments of information. One historian mentioned ancient carvings depicting dragon-like creatures interacting with humans. Another source referenced legends of gods descending from the skies during times of crisis. None of it added up. Yet everything hinted at a connection between the past and the present. By dawn, the world braced itself for the unknown. The Draconian fleet remained silent, its intentions unclear. For Daniel, Laura, and millions of others, the question lingered. Were these visitors friends, foes, or something entirely beyond comprehension? Only time would tell. But time was running out. The United Nations convened an emergency meeting in New York City, bringing together leaders from every corner of the globe. The atmosphere was tense, filled with whispered conversations, and nervous glances. General Richard Monroe, a tall man with graying hair and a stern expression, stood at the center of the room, addressing the assembly. "We don't know their intentions yet," he said firmly, "but we can't afford to sit idle. We need to establish contact." A team of scientists and military personnel worked around the clock to prepare a message for the mysterious fleet. They loaded drones with recorded greetings in multiple languages, images of Earth, and symbols meant to convey peace. Laura Bennett watched from the sidelines, jotting down notes for her next article. She couldn't help but feel skeptical. What if the aliens didn't understand? Or worse, what if they saw the gesture as a threat? The drones were launched into the sky, climbing higher and higher until they reached the outer edges of Earth's atmosphere. Cameras on the ground captured their ascent, broadcasting live to millions of viewers worldwide. People held their breath, waiting for any sign of response. But instead of acknowledgement, disaster struck. One by one, the drones exploded in bursts of light, disintegrated instantly by some unseen force. Laura's phone buzzed with notifications as social media erupted in chaos. Videos of the destruction went viral, sparking outrage and fear. Governments doubled down on defensive measures, deploying fighter jets and missile systems near major cities. Yet, no one dared to attack the fleet directly. Its sheer size and silence made it seem invincible. In Arizona, Daniel Harper continued monitoring the fleet through his telescope. He noticed subtle changes in their formation, smaller ships breaking away from the main group and descending toward Earth. His hands trembled as he adjusted the lens, trying to get a clearer view. Each ship moved with precision, heading toward specific locations across the globe. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, all ancient sites tied to humanity's earliest civilizations. Daniel called Laura immediately. "They're targeting landmarks," he explained hurriedly. "Places connected to our history. I think they're looking for something." Laura listened intently, her mind racing. If the fleet wasn't here to communicate, then what did they want? And why focus on ruins thousands of years old? She decided to visit Dr. Emily Dawson again, hoping the xenobiologist might have answers. When she arrived at the lab, Emily was pacing back and forth, muttering to herself. Papers covered every surface, filled with diagrams and notes. "I've been studying those energy pulses you told me about," Emily said without preamble. "They're not random. They match patterns found in ancient carvings and artifacts. These aliens, they've been here before." Laura's eyes widened. "You mean, this isn't their first visit?" Emily nodded. "It makes sense. Why else would they target places like Stonehenge? They're searching for something left behind, a relic, maybe even technology." Meanwhile, Captain Matthew Cole prepared his unit for the worst. The largest ship loomed over the Great Pyramid, casting a shadow that stretched across the desert sands. Soldiers tightened their grips on their rifles, sweat dripping down their faces despite the cool morning air. Orders came through crackling radios. "Hold position. Do not engage unless fired upon." But when the ship began emitting a low hum, the ground beneath them shook violently. A beam of light shot downward, carving a deep trench into the earth. Panic spread among the troops as debris flew everywhere. Matthew shouted commands, but his voice was drowned out by the deafening roar. Within moments, the pyramid itself seemed to shudder, its ancient stones cracking under the strain. Hundreds of miles away, Daniel watched news footage of the event unfold. His stomach churned as he realized the implications. The Draconians weren't just exploring. They were excavating. Whatever they sought, they were determined to find it, no matter the cost. Laura felt a growing sense of urgency. If Emily's theory was correct, then humanity's survival might depend on uncovering the truth about these visitors. And fast. She grabbed her notebook and headed for the door, already planning her next move. Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. The world watched in stunned silence as the Draconian fleet split into smaller squadrons, each descending toward ancient landmarks scattered across the globe. In Egypt, Captain Matthew Cole, and his unit braced themselves as the massive ship above the Great Pyramid unleashed another beam of light. This time, the beam drilled deep into the ground, creating a cavernous hole that swallowed tons of sand and rock. The pyramid groaned under the pressure, its once mighty structure beginning to crumble. Matthew barked orders to his men, but chaos reigned. Soldiers scrambled for cover as chunks of stone rained down around them. One young soldier, barely out of training, froze in terror until Matthew grabbed him by the arm and yanked him behind a crumbling wall. "Stay sharp," Matthew shouted over the noise. "We can't fight them, but we sure as hell won't let them take whatever they're after without a fight." Back in Arizona, Daniel Harper stared at his computer screen, piecing together patterns he'd observed from the fleet's movements. Each targeted site had one thing in common. They were all tied to humanity's earliest civilizations: Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, the Nazca Lines, all places steeped in mystery and legend. He scribbled notes furiously, connecting dots that had eluded him before. The energy pulses emitted by the ships weren't random scans. They were searching for something specific buried beneath these ancient structures. Laura Bennett arrived at a small cafe in Washington, D.C., where she was supposed to meet Dr. Emily Dawson. The streets outside buzzed with tension. Armed guards patrolled corners, and civilians hurried along, heads down, avoiding eye contact. When Emily finally showed up, her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she opened a folder filled with documents. "I've been digging deeper," Emily said, pushing a map toward Laura. Red circles marked each location the Draconians had targeted. "These aren't just ruins. They're sites connected to an ancient global network." "What kind of network?" Laura asked, leaning closer. Emily hesitated, then whispered, "Some believe it was built by extraterrestrials, or humans guided by them. Legends talk about powerful artifacts hidden underground, objects capable of controlling unimaginable forces." Laura's mind raced. If the Draconians were after such artifacts, what would happen if they found them? She glanced at the map again and noticed something strange. One site hadn't been targeted yet, a remote area in New Mexico known for its ancient cave systems. Could this be the key? Meanwhile, in Peru, a squadron of Draconian ships hovered over Machu Picchu, their sleek forms casting eerie shadows on the mountainside. Locals fled in terror as the aliens began their excavation, blasting through layers of earth with terrifying efficiency. Soldiers stationed nearby tried to intervene, firing missiles at the ships, but the projectiles disintegrated midair, as if hitting an invisible barrier. The soldiers retreated, powerless against the superior technology. In Arizona, Daniel made a decision. He packed his equipment and set off for New Mexico, convinced that the answers lay in those caves. Along the way, he called Laura and shared his theory. "If they haven't hit New Mexico yet, maybe we still have a chance to figure out what they're after," he said. "But we need to move fast." Laura agreed to meet him there, knowing they couldn't rely on governments or militaries to stop the Draconians. As she drove west, she thought about everything she'd learned so far: ancient legends, mysterious carvings, and now alien invasions. It all seemed too incredible to believe. Yet here she was, racing against time to prevent a catastrophe. By the time Daniel reached the cave system, night had fallen. The air was cold and damp, and the sound of distant thunder echoed through the valley. Using a flashlight, he ventured inside, finding strange markings etched into the walls. Symbols unlike anything he'd ever seen glowed faintly, reacting to his presence. His heart pounded as he realized he might be standing on the brink of discovery or disaster. Unbeknownst to him, Laura wasn't far behind. Together, they hoped to uncover the truth before the Draconians did. But with every passing second, the invaders grew closer, their relentless pursuit leaving destruction in their wake. Time was running out, not just for Daniel and Laura, but for all of humanity. Daniel Harper moved cautiously through the damp, narrow tunnels of the cave system in New Mexico. His flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story. The symbols were unlike anything he'd ever encountered, sharp angular lines forming shapes that resembled dragons or serpents intertwined with human figures. As he traced his fingers over one of the glowing markings, a faint hum reverberated through the air, sending shivers down his spine. Laura Bennett arrived shortly after, her boots crunching softly on the rocky ground. She carried a small backpack filled with supplies and a notebook, ready to document whatever they found. When she saw the glowing symbols, her breath caught. "Do you think these are connected to the Draconians?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's possible," Daniel replied, his eyes scanning the walls. "These look like they were made by whoever, or whatever, the Draconians are looking for." They ventured deeper into the cave, following the trail of glowing symbols. The further they went, the stronger the vibrations became, as though the walls themselves were alive. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the cave. In its center stood a crystalline structure, roughly the size of a person. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, casting an otherworldly glow across the room. Laura approached it slowly, her curiosity outweighing her fear. "This must be what they're after," she said, her voice trembling. "But what is it?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know. But if the Draconians want it this badly, we can't let them have it." Before they could examine it further, a low rumble echoed through the cave. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the ground beneath their feet quaked. "They're here," Daniel muttered, grabbing Laura's arm. "We need to figure out how this thing works." Now, Laura hesitated, then reached out to touch the crystal. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy coursed through her body. Images flooded her mind, visions of towering dragon-like beings descending from the sky, ruling over primitive humans who bowed before them. She saw battles fought with weapons that defied explanation, and eventually, the downfall of the draconic overlords. The crystal, she realized, was called Asterisk, the Nexus Asterisk. It wasn't just a relic. It was a source of immense power, capable of amplifying or neutralizing forces, depending on who wielded it. When the vision ended, Laura stumbled back, gasping for air. "They ruled us once," she told Daniel, her voice shaking. "Humans rebelled against them thousands of years ago, using fragments of the Nexus. That's why they're back. They want to reclaim their power." Daniel nodded grimly. "Then we need to use it against them." Outside, the sound of engines roared as Draconian ships descended upon the cave. Soldiers stationed nearby attempted to hold them off, but their efforts were futile. The aliens advanced relentlessly, their weapons cutting through defenses with ease. Captain Matthew Cole led a desperate last stand, buying time for anyone still inside the cave. Back in the chamber, Daniel and Laura worked quickly. They noticed that the crystal responded to touch, changing colors and intensifying its glow when activated. Using clues from the carvings, they figured out how to channel its energy. But activating the Nexus came with risks. It required complete focus, and even a slight mistake could cause catastrophic consequences. As the sounds of battle grew louder, Laura turned to Daniel. "If this doesn't work, we might not make it out alive." He met her gaze, determination etched on his face. "If it saves the planet, it'll be worth it." With no time left to hesitate, Laura placed both hands on the Nexus, focusing all her energy on the task ahead. The crystal flared brightly, bathing the chamber in blinding light. Outside, the Draconian ships paused mid-attack, their systems disrupted by an unseen force. For the first time since their arrival, humanity had struck back, and the aliens didn't see it coming. But the fight was far from over. The blinding light from the Nexus faded, leaving Daniel and Laura breathless but alive. The crystal's glow dimmed slightly, but its energy still pulsed through the chamber like a living heartbeat. Outside, the Draconian ships hovered uncertainly, their sleek forms trembling as though confused by the sudden surge of power. For a moment, it seemed as though humanity had gained the upper hand. But the victory was short-lived. As Laura and Daniel prepared to leave the cave, They heard voices echoing through the tunnels, human voices. At first, they thought it might be soldiers coming to help, but the tone was all wrong. The words were clipped, urgent, and accompanied by heavy footsteps. Someone was searching for them. Daniel grabbed Laura's arm, pulling her into the shadows. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of approaching boots. Moments later, a group of men in military uniforms appeared, led by Senator Harold Griffin. His face was grim, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something darker, desperation. "Where is it?" Griffin demanded, his eyes scanning the chamber. When he spotted the nexus, his expression shifted to one of triumph. He motioned for his men to secure the area. "We don't have much time. They'll regroup soon." Laura stepped forward, her anger outweighing her fear. "What are you doing here? This isn't your fight." Griffin turned to her, his voice cold and dismissive. "This isn't about fighting. It's about survival. Do you really think we can win against beings like them? They're superior in every way. Humanity doesn't stand a chance." Daniel frowned. "So what, you're just going to hand it over to them?" Griffin's jaw tightened. "I'm negotiating a truce. If we give them the nexus, they'll spare certain regions, places I've designated as safe zones. It's the only way to save lives." Laura couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You betrayed us. For this." "I did what I had to do," Griffin snapped. "History will judge me, not you." Before anyone could react, Griffin signaled his men to seize the nexus. Laura lunged toward it instinctively, shouting at Daniel to stop them. A scuffle broke out, with Griffin's men overpowering the two scientists. One of the soldiers grabbed Laura, holding her back as Griffin approached the nexus. He reached out, his fingers inches from the glowing crystal. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, nearly knocking everyone off their feet. The vibrations grew stronger, and the walls of the chamber began to crack. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the air filled with an eerie hum. The nexus was reacting, fighting back against Griffin's interference. "You don't understand," Laura screamed, struggling against the soldier holding her. "You can't control it. It'll destroy everything." Griffin hesitated, his confidence wavering. But it was too late. The crystal flared again, brighter than before, sending waves of energy rippling outward. The lights on Griffin's men's weapons flickered and died, leaving them defenseless. The senator stumbled backward, shielding his face as the chamber collapsed around them. Daniel seized the opportunity, grabbing Laura's hand and pulling her toward the tunnel leading out of the cave. "We need to get out of here, now." They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and narrowly avoiding being crushed by collapsing rocks. Behind them, Griffin shouted orders, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of destruction. By the time they reached the surface, the entrance to the cave was sealed shut, trapping Griffin and his men inside. Outside, chaos reigned. Soldiers fought valiantly against the remaining Draconian forces, but the aliens' technology gave them a clear advantage. Explosions lit up the night sky, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Captain Matthew Cole led a final charge, sacrificing himself to buy more time for civilians to escape. As Daniel and Laura caught their breath, they knew the battle wasn't over. The Nexus had saved them, for now. But the Draconians wouldn't give up easily. They would return, stronger and angrier than ever. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. Laura looked at Daniel, her expression resolute. "We can't let Griffin's betrayal stop us. We have to finish this." Daniel nodded. "Then we'd better figure out how to use the Nexus before they come back." Together, they set off into the darkness, determined to protect Earth, even if it meant risking everything. Daniel and Laura stood at the edge of the collapsed cave, their faces streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The battle behind them raged on, but they knew they couldn't stay there. They had survived Griffin's betrayal and the cave-in, but time was running out. The Draconians would regroup soon, and when they did, humanity's chances of survival would be slimmer than ever. "We need help," Laura said, her voice trembling as she glanced back at the destruction. "We can't do this alone." Daniel nodded in agreement. "There are still people out there who haven't given up. We just have to find them." They decided to head toward a nearby military outpost, where rogue units loyal to General Richard Monroe were rumored to be stationed. These soldiers had refused to follow orders from compromised officials like Griffin and were determined to fight back against the invaders. Along the way, they scavenged supplies from abandoned vehicles and buildings, doing their best to avoid both alien patrols and panicked civilians fleeing the chaos. When they finally reached the outpost, they were greeted by Lieutenant Sofia Ramirez, a tough but compassionate woman in her early 30s. Her uniform was torn, and her face bore the marks of countless battles, but her eyes burned with determination. She listened intently as Daniel and Laura explained what had happened in the cave and showed her sketches of the Nexus. "This thing, it could actually stop them?" Sophia asked, skepticism mixing with hope. "It's our only shot," Daniel replied, "but we need a way to get close enough to use it without getting blown out of the sky." Sophia thought for a moment, then nodded. "We've got something that might work. A stealth aircraft we salvaged from an old research project. It's not much, but it's fast, and its cloaking tech might keep you hidden long enough to reach their mothership." The trio spent hours preparing the aircraft, retrofitting it with stolen alien technology Daniel had gathered during his research. Laura helped wire the equipment together, her hands steady despite the weight of what they were about to attempt. As dawn broke, the small team gathered around the plane, its sleek design blending seamlessly into the desert landscape. "You're really going through with this?" Sophia asked, her voice soft but firm. "If you fail—" "We don't have a choice," Laura interrupted. "If we don't try, everyone loses." Sophia placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then make it count." With that, Daniel climbed into the pilot's seat, while Laura secured herself in the co-pilot's chair. Before taking off, Laura turned to Sophia one last time. "Thank you for everything." Sophia gave her a tight smile. "Bring us back some good news." As the aircraft lifted off the ground, cloaking itself moments later, Daniel and Laura felt the enormity of their mission pressing down on them. Below, the world burned, cities reduced to rubble, forests scorched, and skies filled with smoke. But above it all loomed the Draconian fleet, its ships casting ominous shadows over the broken planet. Navigating carefully, Daniel guided the aircraft toward the largest ship, the mothership. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the light of the rising sun. Sensors indicated heavy defenses surrounding it, but the cloaking device held strong, masking their approach. Inside the cockpit, Laura clutched the Nexus tightly, its faint glow pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She thought about everything they'd been through, the ruins, the visions, Griffin's betrayal, and steeled herself for what lay ahead. Whatever happened next, they couldn't afford to hesitate. As they neared the mothership, alarms suddenly blared within the aircraft. A squadron of smaller ships had detected them and was closing in fast. Daniel swore under his breath, pushing the engines to their limit. "Hold on," he shouted, banking sharply to evade enemy fire. Sophia's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm coming in hot, providing covert fire." Moments later, explosions lit up the sky as Sophia led a desperate assault, drawing the attention of the pursuing ships. Her voice came through again, strained but resolute. "Go. I'll hold them off." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she watched Sophia's plane dive into the fray, sacrificing herself to ensure their success. Daniel didn't say a word, his jaw clenched as he focused on reaching the mothership. With one final burst of speed, they slipped past the defensive perimeter and entered the massive vessel. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, the walls lined with strange, glowing panels. At the center of the ship stood Zoreth, the Draconian commander, a towering figure with scales that shimmered like obsidian and eyes that burned with intelligence and malice. He turned to face them, his expression unreadable. "You dare challenge us?" Zorath's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. Laura stepped forward, holding the Nexus high. "We're not afraid of you anymore." And with that, the final confrontation began. Zorath's eyes narrowed as he studied Laura and Daniel, his massive form casting a shadow over the chamber. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of energy from the Nexus intensified in Laura's hands. She could feel its power pulsing, almost alive, responding to her determination. Zorath took a step forward, his voice low and menacing. "You think a relic of our past can stop us? You are fools." Daniel stepped closer to Laura, his fists clenched. "We're not here to negotiate or surrender. We're here to end this." Zorath let out a deep, rumbling laugh that echoed off the metallic walls. "End it. You cannot even comprehend the forces you meddle with." He raised a clawed hand, and the room was suddenly flooded with light as holographic images appeared, scenes of ancient Earth, showing Draconians ruling over primitive humans who bowed before them. "This planet belongs to us. Your ancestors stole it from us, using fragments of the Nexus. Now, we reclaim what is ours." Laura tightened her grip on the Nexus, her resolve hardening. "If humanity took it back once, we'll do it again." Zorath's expression darkened. Without warning, he lunged toward them, moving faster than either of them expected. Daniel shoved Laura aside just in time, barely avoiding Zorath's razor-sharp claws. The commander turned, his tail lashing out and knocking Daniel to the ground. Laura stumbled but held onto the Nexus, her heart pounding. "Activate it," Daniel shouted, struggling to get up. "Now." Laura hesitated for only a moment before focusing all her energy on the Nexus. Its glow brightened, sending waves of light rippling across the chamber. Zorath roared in anger, raising his arms to shield himself from the blinding radiance. The ship itself began to tremble, its systems disrupted by the surge of energy. "You don't know what you're doing," Zorath snarled, his voice strained. "You'll destroy everything, including yourselves." But Laura didn't listen. She remembered the visions she'd seen when she first touched the Nexus, the battles between humans and Draconians, the rebellion sparked by fragments of the crystal. She understood now. The Nexus wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, capable of amplifying any force directed through it. And right now, she was channeling every ounce of her willpower into driving the invaders away. The chamber shook violently as the energy from the Nexus reached its peak. Zorath staggered backward, his scales cracking under the strain. "No," he bellowed, slamming his fists against the floor. "I will not be undone again." Daniel scrambled to his feet, grabbing a fallen piece of alien tech, a jagged shard glowing faintly blue, and hurled it at Zorath. It struck the commander's arm, causing him to roar in pain. Distracted, Zorath faltered, giving Laura the opening she needed. With one final push, she unleashed the full power of the Nexus. A deafening boom filled the chamber as a shockwave erupted outward, engulfing Zorath and everything around him. The walls of the mothership shimmered and dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of light and shadow. Laura and Daniel shielded their faces as the energy consumed the space, pulling Zorath and the entire fleet into the rift. When the light faded, silence fell. The chamber was empty except for Laura and Daniel, who stood trembling amidst the wreckage. The mothership's systems were dead, its once imposing structure reduced to ruins. Outside, the skies cleared, revealing stars twinkling peacefully above. Daniel collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. Did we do it?" Laura looked down at the Nexus, its glow dimmed but still present. "I think so," she whispered. "They're gone." For a moment, they simply stared at each other, overwhelmed by what they had accomplished. Then Daniel broke the silence. "Come on. Let's get out of here." As they made their way back to the aircraft, they saw signs of hope below. Soldiers cheered, civilians emerged from hiding, and fires were extinguished. Word spread quickly. The Draconian fleet had vanished without a trace. Back on Earth, People celebrated cautiously, unsure of whether the aliens would return. But for now, the immediate threat was over. Daniel and Laura became reluctant heroes, hailed for their bravery, despite knowing how close humanity had come to annihilation. Yet, as they gazed up at the night sky, neither of them felt truly safe. The galaxy was vast, and the Draconians' fate remained a mystery. Only time would tell if peace would last, or if darker forces lingered beyond the stars. The days following the disappearance of the Draconian fleet were surreal. News outlets around the world broadcast endless reports, replaying footage of the skies clearing and the invaders vanishing without explanation. Scientists debated the event. Politicians scrambled to explain their actions, or lack thereof, and ordinary people tried to return to some semblance of normal life. But for Daniel Harper and Laura Bennett, the aftermath was anything but ordinary. They found themselves at the center of attention, hailed as heroes by some and scrutinized as reckless adventurers by others. Reporters camped outside their temporary quarters, desperate for interviews. Government officials requested private meetings, eager to understand what had happened aboard the mothership. But Daniel and Laura refused to cooperate fully. They knew sharing too much about the Nexus could put humanity in even greater danger if the wrong people got their hands on it. Instead, they focused on safeguarding the artifact. With help from trusted allies like Lieutenant Sofia Ramirez, who had miraculously survived her diversion during their mission, they transported the Nexus to a secure underground facility. There, scientists worked tirelessly to study its properties while ensuring it remained dormant. Laura insisted that only a small group of carefully vetted individuals should ever have access to it. One evening, as Daniel and Laura sat together in a quiet corner of the facility, exhaustion etched on their faces, Laura finally spoke. "Do you think we'll ever really know why they came back?" Daniel shook his head. "Maybe not, but I think we stopped them from taking whatever they wanted." Laura nodded slowly. "For now, anyway." Her words hung heavy in the air. Both of them understood that the victory felt fragile, almost temporary. The rift created by the Nexus had swallowed the Draconians whole, pulling them into another dimension, or so they assumed. But no one could say for sure where the fleet had gone, or if it still existed somewhere beyond human reach. The thought weighed on them constantly. In the weeks that followed, Laura began documenting everything they'd learned about the Nexus and the Draconians. She wrote detailed accounts of the carvings, the visions, and their encounters with Zoreth, hoping future generations would be better prepared if history repeated itself. Daniel, meanwhile, worked with engineers to develop new technologies based on the alien artifacts they'd salvage. Humanity needed to grow stronger, he believed, to face whatever challenges might come next. As word of the events spread across the galaxy, distant civilizations took notice. Some saw Earth's survival as proof of resilience. Others viewed it as a warning. Speculation swirled about how such an unremarkable planet had managed to repel the mighty Draconian armada. No one outside Earth knew the truth about the Nexus, and Daniel and Laura intended to keep it that way. Months later, life on Earth began to stabilize. Cities rebuilt, families reunited, and the scars of war slowly healed. Yet beneath the surface, tensions lingered. Governments argued over control of the Nexus. Corporations sought ways to exploit it, and conspiracy theories flourished online. Daniel and Laura stayed vigilant, knowing the battle wasn't truly over. It had simply shifted from open conflict to silent struggle. One night, under a sky filled with stars, Daniel joined Laura on the roof of the facility. They stood side by side, gazing upward in silence. Finally, Daniel broke the quiet. "Do you think they'll come back?" Laura didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft but steady. "Maybe, but if they do, we'll be ready." Neither of them voiced the fear lingering in their hearts, that the rift might reopen, or that other threats lurked among the stars. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, grateful for the fragile calm they'd fought so hard to achieve. As the world moved forward, questions remained unanswered. What had become of the Draconians? Could the Nexus protect Earth forever? Or was this just the beginning of a larger cosmic story? Only time would tell.